Look, good morning, everybody, and welcome. We are discussing Parshat Bo this morning. Parshat Bo is really critical parsha in terms of the um, the Exodus, and given that last week we discussed the first seven of the plagues, 8, 9, and 10 are in this parsha. I could have gone there, but I have a much more important theme for this week's parsha than the plagues. And you may have heard me talk about this certainly on Shabbat and before during the parsha of the wrestling between Jacob and the angel, the mysterious assailant. And there's been a passage that has always perplexed me, puzzled me. And I wanted to go into a little more depth on that passage this morning. And frankly, like any other passage, the more you look into it, the more you discuss it, the more you go into it, the more you are puzzled by it. It's just a fascinating thing. And I didn't even get a chance to collate some of the rabbinic texts on it. They all tend to cluster in one way anyway, so I'll make a short reference. The passage is where Pharaoh summons Moses in the middle of the night. It's the climax of the whole story. Pharaoh summons Moses in the middle of the night and says, basically, get the hell out of here, right? Leave already, okay? So I want to share this passage. I want to look at it. We're going to look at it, at 30,000 feet. We're going to look at it, under a microscope. And then, as usual, because we're on this video platform, I have to share some other sources or things that shape my theme. And the theme is really grace. And I'll pitch the question, at the beginning as a way of kind of hooking everyone, which is, what's going on in that encounter between Moses and Pharaoh, as Pharaoh summons Moses and says, leave. And what does Pharaoh want? And is Moses willing to give it to him? And in the end, what happens and what's the dynamic there? And I have to say, it's such a powerful, powerful theme. That's why I can't resist it. So without further ado, I'm going to begin here. And this is my text, and it's also, I will share the link with you if anybody wants it to study on, to review. Okay, we're calling it when Pharaoh said, bless me, on the meaning of grace. The verse is as follows. Vayi b'chatzi halayla, and you know this from the Haggadah. Okay, in the middle of the night, the Lord struck down all of the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the captive, who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh arose in the night with all his courtiers and all the Egyptian, because there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was no house where there was not someone dead. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, up, depart from among my people, you and the Israelites with you. Go, worship the Lord as you said. Take also your flocks and your herds, as you said, and be gone, and bless me as well. The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And the Lord had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request, and thus they stripped the Egyptians. So we have, as usual, a lot going on in this text. The sheer terror, the sheer, panic that is enveloping the Egyptians. This is the 10th plague, so they've been, battered and smothered and crushed up until now. But this is really the most severe plague and the most symbolic of the plagues, the killing of the firstborn, which, by the way, was promised by Moses in the first instance. B'ni b'chori Yisrael, this is what you should say to Pharaoh. Israel is my firstborn, therefore I will slay your firstborn. It's an enigmatic passage, and I don't want to go into, what's the significance of the firstborn, other than to say in the briefest note that the firstborn is the entitlement of the divine, and Pharaoh is a divine, considers himself to be, a divine being, and so he's entitled to all the firstborn of Egypt. By slaying the firstborn, God, as it were, is removing all the apparatus of his governance from him, and therefore reducing him and crushing him, in addition to obviously the great human suffering. We have another major debate, among us modern people. You may have seen us kind of bristle with this last week on our Parsha talk. That my colleagues feel that God and Moses are too harsh on Pharaoh, and I think I take a little more of a different tack here, because the story wouldn't make sense without the severity of this, and it's meant to obviously terrify us and to be crushing. Okay, I don't want to get comments right now, but we'll go into the text. Okay, so I want to focus on this. Vayikra l'Moshe u'la'Aaron laila. He calls to him at night. Kumutsu mitoch ami gam atem gam bnei Yisrael. Get out from my people, you and Israel, bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. L'chu yivdu et Adonai daberchem. Gam sonchem, gam becharchem, kichu kasher dibartem alechu, uverachtem gam oti. So, as usual, you look at a text and you say, interesting here. Biblical texts are they're seductive. They want to draw you in. They want to say darshuni. They want you to interpret them. That's the joy of studying the Torah in Hebrew. Of course, it comes out in English, but it's not as blatant in English. You really have to work at it. The text is inviting you to engage with it and to ask the questions that we're going to ask here, which is, why is Pharaoh speaking almost poetically to Moses, or is the narrator shaping what Pharaoh says in this poetic way? And what is the content of what he's saying that's embedded in the poetry or the structure of what he's saying? I think this is, to me, one of the richest questions you can ask of the text is, you're saying, what is the text saying, and how is the text saying it, and how the text says it tells you more about what it's saying. So here we go. I'm going to give you my analysis of the text. All right, and I've broken it up as follows. Okay, I want to give you the poetry of this. I note, for example, that there are pairs here, 3 pairs of these tzivuyim. Okay, the second person plural command. Kumu tzu. Okay, so that's the 3 pairs of that. Kumu tzu, lechu ivdu, and then split. Kechu valechu. So kumu tzu means up and out. Lechu ivdu, go and serve. Kechu valechu, take and go. So notice, and I didn't repeat the here, you have lechu repeated, but kumutsu, so you have 3 pairs, but there's a 7th verb here that's not a command.
Yeah, what was this?
It's not a command, it's would you consider berachtem et tzivui? My grammarians here.
Yes.
But it's not in the same declension as kumutsu.
Yeah, it's not uverachu, but it's a future.
It's a vav hipuch. Okay, so it berachtem is in the past tense. The vav hipuch is it switches it to the future. It's not the same. It's not the same tense as kumutsu. Kumu, I'm going to do this, aggressively. Punch. Lechu ivdu. Kechu valechu. Okay, and berachtem is not a punch. Berachtem, uverachtem is not a punch. Okay, so that's my first note here, that you have these are commands, but when it comes to me, I'm gonna not command you. I'm going to ask you. I'm gonna I'm dressing it up a little bit. I'm going to, would you kindly bless me, is what he's saying. Okay. Second, mitoch ami. So I put a red highlight around this because I want to indicate that there is woven into this three kind of, similar things here. Go from my people, et Adonai and oti. Okay. Now, what is the difference between saying go from my people and get out of my face? Okay, which he doesn't say. He says kumu tzu'u mitoch ami. He's saying I leave my people, which means, in my interpretation here, is that he is collapsing his identity with his people, right? It's not that he doesn't want him to he wants, he is identifying with his people, and he's saying, I want to excise you from them, because when it comes to me, I want something from you personally. Okay. So
is personal.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Ami is personal.
Ami there's a hint of the personal, but that would be imi, but it's not. It's ami and it's deliberate that it's my nation. But I'm saying that his nation is personal to him, right? He is l'état c'est moi. The state is me. I am the state. This is the pretense of the megalomaniac, or the pretense of the totalitarian ruler, which is, I am the state, I am the nation. Come, leave from me, leave from the nation. Okay? So notice then the syllable tem, atem, dibartem, virachtem, a nice touch here. Notice the syllable chem, chem, chem. It's also a nice touch here. And notice that uverachtem is kind of like a cha and a ta together, berachtem. So there's some poetics going on here. Notice the word gam, gamatem, gam b'nei Yisrael, l'chu ivdu et Adonai l'gadol, gam tzonchem, gam b'karchem, kiku kasher dibart v'alev v'yachtem, gamoti. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, pam, 5. Okay, the gamoti is the emphasis on the last thing. So everything that Pharaoh is saying is to get to the final conclusion, which is, this is what I want. And then he says, in the center of this text, okay, those of you who have studied these things before with me know that what I like to do is count up words. And I often like to do this exercise as an experiment and show that you often find the most important idea in the exact center of the text. There are 25 words here. The exact center, word 12 and 13 of a 25-word passage is et Adonai. So what this means poetically is he's saying, look, I am putting God at the center. I'm doing what you asked me to do. I'm acknowledging. Yeah, okay, I'm acknowledging. Finally. Okay. But then at the end, he's putting himself parallel to God. Okay. And that's the end. That's even though God is central, he's the climax. Come oti, me. That's what Pharaoh is saying. Okay. Why does he say gam atem gam b'nei Yisrael? This is to differentiate between his perception of his identity as the state, and then gam atem is a reference to Moses and Aaron. Gam b'nei Yisrael, you are not me. You are detached from your people. You are not unified with your people. You are separate. Gam atem, you're a separate class. Gam b'nei Yisrael, they're separate. So there's a kind of pejorative understanding here in this. Okay? And then berachtem gamoti. So I'm going to repeat my analysis. The commanding verbs, 7 verbs, 3 verb pairs in the tzivui mode. Kumu tzu'u, l'chu uvdu, kichu v'alechu. And they're arranged in a way that has a poetic punch because the first 2 come as a pair, but kichu has kichu da v'alechu. All right? The first 2 instances are paired, the third is split. This gives the last word, uvarachtem, much more force, for it is different in tone. The last word is plaintive. Whoops, a daisy. I'm sorry. The last word is plaintive, not commanding. The climactic verb in Pharaoh's statement is directed to himself. He wants to be the object of Moses and Israel's grace. That's the most important thing. And this is, we're getting the Torah's, yeah, last week I talked about the satire. I want to say that the subtext of this, the supertext of this is that this is God and Pharaoh. The subtext is that the totalitarian ruler, the one with all the power, is a little creep, is a little pathetic creature. Okay, he's only worried about his own, his own pathetic, whether or not he will be in his good in the graces of, he wants to survive basically. I didn't put all the commentators in here, but they're really all clustered on one theme, which is, pray on my behalf, okay? Which is absurd on some level, and they're getting that this is absurd, but the text itself doesn't have to tell you that it's absurd. It wants to draw you into the understanding poetically that the request for grace and forgiveness and blessing from Moses is, I would say, chutzpah, right? Okay. Mitoch ami, Pharaoh collapsed the boundaries between himself and his nation. Gam is the intensifier. How much gum can you chew in this passage? 6 times. What is the climactic gam with Pharaoh? Gamoti. Okay. What is the purpose of gamatem, gam b'nei Yisrael? Pharaoh wants to place a divider between Moses, Aaron, and the people. The implication is a subtle insult. You are detached from your people, not like me, who is identified with the people. Atem, dibartem, berachtem. Why the repetition of the syllable? The first 2 set up the third, the implicit message. I am doing this for you. You do this for me. Okay, that's the poetry of this. The poetry kind of states implicitly a quid pro quo. You're gonna, I'm letting you go, berach, you go, atem, kasher dibartem, berachtem. In the name of God, note that Pharaoh places God's name at the dead center of the statement. The central element of any verse passage is most crucial. By placing God at the center, Pharaoh's recognizing God's centrality, but he places himself in the opposite parallel position at the end of the verse, meaning I am still parallel to God. Et Hashem oti. These two are both parallel. And then I say, who the heck does he think he is? This is the ultimate arrogance, right? He's saying that this is the ultimate statement. The ultimate statement is, you're going to go to God, but I want your blessing for me. Okay. I want you to note one more poetic thing, which is the tzadi and the kuf. Okay, go back to the text here. Kumu, kuf, tzadi, kuf, tzadi, kuf, tzadi, and then tzon, bikar, kichu. Or you might want to say tzon, kichu. This is what's called chiasma, the A-B-B-A form. When you have, and this is why I can see that this is brilliant poetics here going on. This is, I said so many times in Breshit, God bless the narrator. God bless you. Have to admire that embedded in the text here is just treasure. It's jewelry. It's diamonds. Okay, what are they doing here? They're just playing with every faculty. Kumu tzu, and then he's reversing it here. Son kichu. All right, this by consonants. Okay, and last, I want to say, note also the collapse of the chem and tem in the word berachtem is a fusion of tam. All right, so that's my poetics. Go back to the verse again, and you see that what's going on here is stunning in its presentation of an idea. The goal Pharaoh wants in this moment, he is summoning the people to leave, but he wants payola. He wants a pardon, okay? He wants a blessing. He wants to get into Moses' good graces because there's an insurance that he wants here from them. You have shown all this power, but I guess I have to hedge my bets. I want, I didn't want to go here, but I want the pardon. I want the blessing. I want, as we depart, I want this grace. I guess there's a subconscious reason why we're going here. Okay. So here's the question. What does Pharaoh want and why? Pharaoh wants Moses' grace. Moses, not going to give it. Pharaoh is undeserving of grace because he has caused so much immeasurable human suffering and is not worthy of divine or human forgiveness. Pharaoh is undeserving of grace because even at the final moment, even in the way he discharges the Israelites from him, he is still not acknowledging God. And Moses understands who he's dealing with. Moses gets this. That's why Moses doesn't reply. And Moses never answers him and says, okay, leave me alone. Doesn't say this at all. He just turns around from him. There's no answer to this. This is, as I say, the chutzpah of Pharaoh's request is not worthy of a response. Okay, the Pharaoh's petition for grace is absurd on the face of it. You killed the Egyptian, you killed Israelite children. You subjected us to years of hard labor. When we asked you for freedom, you didn't let us go. You made it harder for us. You are the ultimate totalitarian despot. And for that, not only are you not worthy of grace, you are worthy of punishment. Okay? But there's an interesting contrast in the text itself, and that is that the people of Egypt give the people of Israel grace. The people have grace, albeit God disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Go back to the text here. Okay, what happens? The Israelites had done Moses' bidding, borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. Okay, I don't want to go into, did they borrow, did they take, did they borrow, did they take? Again, it's cunning here. But the point is, Hashem Natan et chen ha'am. It's out there in the open. The people give Israel the grace that they need. The people of Egypt, give Israel grace. There is graciousness to them. So the people leave, I think, on, I don't want to say good terms, but terms. They're able to separate from each other. The word vayinatzel, here they translate it as they stripped the Egyptian. I'm not comfortable with that translation. I want to say, and there's also to vanquish the Egyptians. I want to say that there's a little more benevolence here. I don't know if I'm justified in saying it that way. My point is, though, Pharaoh's not going to give grace or get grace from them. The Egyptians and the Israelites, the people, leave on good terms, let's say. Okay? All right. So now, in the resolution of conflict, grace is necessary, or else the conflict will continue. Grace is mandatory for the resumption of normalcy, the restoration of order after the conflict. And this is what's been puzzling me since, for a while now. I've been meaning to give this kind of presentation for some time. Because whenever I read the story of Jacob and the angel, that the coda of the story is the most profound moment of the story, right? The wrestling doesn't matter, right? It's what happens at the end. They wrestle until nightfall, until morning, and then what happens? So here's the text. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, it's a tie. He wrenched Jacob's hip at his socket. It's a low blow, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That's Jacob. Jacob saying, "I want your grace for me. I want to know I can go on, right? I'm in this wrestling. I want you to go." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed. Jacob asked, pray tell me your name, but he said, you must not ask my name. And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel. I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved. What's so amazing and fascinating about this passage is it ends on a good note. These two combatants are able, as it were, to end their conflict peaceably. And they end with the normal courtesies that you would, I would say, we end with courtesy. Jacob has to solicit it from him, but it comes and it's forthcoming. And it is the defining feature of this moment. The defining moment of the whole match is the conclusion, okay? I'm going to stop here and get your comments because I want you to hold on to that thought as we go into my examples. Ilana, you had a comment? Yes, go ahead.
I mean, you really did a beautiful presentation for all these words and connection and all this about and you should bless. I think we can also interpret that the fact that they will be leaving the country will be a blessing for me. Like, okay, I want to get rid of you already. Go, leave, and just this fact will be a bracha for me.
Okay, so there's relief. Okay. So you're saying instead of understanding it in this way, understand it as
no, not instead. In addition.
In addition. Okay, good. Okay, Bob.
I'll have a more specific question later, but a more basic thing for me is I'm less familiar with the use of the term grace in Judaism
Indeed.
Versus in Christianity. And so I'm wondering if you could say some more about grace and bless and what this means here.
So the word is chen, and it's not that Judaism doesn't have a concept of chen. It's that we don't, we suffer, Jews. We suffer because we live in a Christian world, okay? And Christians have borrowed a lot from Judaism and Christianized a lot of things, including that concept, and including love, and including faith. So that when Jews speak openly about, in English, in the English language, which is essentially a Christian language, when you say, I love God, for Jews to say, I love God makes you feel uncomfortable because it sounds very Christian. For Jews to say in English, grace, it makes us uncomfortable because it sounds Christian. Just like, to say that we are the servant. The Christians have used that idea as the central tenet of Christian theology, but it's central to Judaism, Eved Hashem, okay? So part of the problem of grace is that it's a Christianized language, and therefore, but if we use the word chen, it's exactly what it is. There's a certain, the chen is kindness. The chen is a grace. The chen is chesed. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. These are essential concepts. God has grace for us in that God will forgive us. To say that is sounds Christian, but it's actually very Jewish. Steve Parkoff, you had an idea.
Yeah, I want to go back to Moses leaving Pharaoh. And Pharaoh ends by saying, bless me also.
Yes.
Now, you alluded to something, but then you ran right by it. He knows that when the Jews pray to God, they say, Baruch Atah Hashem, right?
Okay.
So he's saying, pray to me too. I'm still a God.
No, I don't think, I disagree. I don't think he knows that. That formula is obviously a later development in Judaism. Look, I have an axe to grind here in this interpretation, and I'm less benevolent towards him. I'm very critical of Pharaoh here. He doesn't want to be worshipped. He wants to be let off the hook because all criminals essentially want to be let off the hook. Ruth, you had it, and then Marlene.
No, just back to Chen. I mean, we do have the concept. Why am I echoing? We do have the concept of. We have the name Chana. My granddaughter is Chana.
Yeah.
So it only sounds Christian in English, but if we're talking Hebrew, it doesn't sound weird at all.
Indeed, indeed. Marlene, go ahead.
If when you're penitent and you finally acknowledge that God, Pharaoh kept saying, I don't see your God, who is he? Now he says, I see him, at least I feel him, and he can bless me. I have to ask you for it because I don't have a relationship. He talks to Moses and he says, you go and your people. He's not talking to the people. He's talking to the people's representative.
I agree. You know, I mean, I made a case here that it's separate, that they're two, but you know, that's the plausible deniability that he's speaking, you know, to the people in front of him. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Susie. I muted you. You were echoing. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, you have, at the end of that second passage, you have Vatinatzel, and you have Vainatzlu.
So I struggle with that translation. How would you translate Vatinatzel? I'm thinking, yeah, Alana, it's
Okay,
My soul has been saved.
yeah, okay.
okay, so, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Alana.
No, did you finish,
Yeah.
Susie? Oh, לנצל is to use. לנצל מישהו to use somebody. But it's also for להציל, to save. The root is nun tzadi lamed.
The same.
So
There's something.
also to save yourselves or.
Okay, good enough. All right, let me go on because I want to go back into this theme. Okay, and here we go. So the conflict is properly resolved. Opponents get what they need from each other in the Jacob and Angel story. And the story is therefore able to proceed without any further conflict. So I use my favorite examples here. The ceremony handshake, you got to see this here, watch this. Okay, so what's beautiful about that is, I mean, the music is an emotion. You know, for us who grew up with this, it is not complete if without that handshake. I can't tell you how important it is in the culture. Okay, you have this ferocious combat, and at the end they shake. So here is just a comment on it. This is from an article on this. This was the NHL's ad campaign. Pays homage to one of hockey's most cherished traditions, the handshake line. It's something all sports fans can appreciate and hockey fans love. After weeks of violent play and increasing animosity comes one of the sports world's great shows of sportsmanship and respect. Players line up to shake hands, putting the pride and integrity of the game and of their franchise above their own. The result is pretty powerful. It's not just a moment sentimentalized by ad men or fans. Bruins forward Brad Marchand, whose first trip to the postseason 2 years ago saw him winning on the winning side of 4 handshake lines, and whose second trip saw him on the losing side after first round disappointment, summed it up during last year's playoffs. As much as you hate them when you're playing against them, at the end of the day, we're all out there trying to do a job and play the game we love, he said, to show each other that respect at the end and realize that everything that's happened is just because we both want to win. It's definitely a great tradition. No one knows exactly when the tradition was born, according to Hockey Hall of Fame, but it has produced innumerable memories, whether coming from the winners, the losers, or the players who just couldn't let go of the lingering anger of the series. I just had to show this.
Is this the season ending dislike each other, despise each other, detest and loathe each other. So to every bitter rival, we say thank you, because the one you hate the most, you also can't live without.
Which is stunning. This is it's a stunning, you know, it's emotional. The one you hate the most, you need the most. You can't live without, right? So there's something that, you know, in the world of sport, you need your opponent. Your opponent makes you a better competitor, right? In sport, when sport is beautiful, you have the rapprochement between competitors. When sport is at its ugliest, you have no rapprochement. Watch the example of the Egyptian judoka shunning the Israeli judoka or Sasson, okay? This will kill you. Oh, come on.
Israel takes the win, and this, well, we've had an incident here. The Egyptian walked away, didn't shake hands with his opponent. He did bow, I think. I did miss that. In fact, he's being called back here. The rules of the sport demand he must not have bowed to his opponent. And, well, Sasson went over to shake his hand and he backed off. So if you want to call that a bow, there it was. That's very disappointing. Now, we talk about that's what the Olympics is about. That's what it's not about. And to his credit, Sasson is just moving on with the caper. We'll get a look at the replay of how it happened, but just spend a second on what we saw there.
Well, Mark, you're an outsider coming in, having a look here at how, you know, the rules of our sport dictate absolute respect for the opponent.
Stunning. It's absolutely stunning. Okay, I'm sorry, just a pause here. It's absolutely stunning that that he didn't do that. Okay, the rules of our sport dictate the absolute respect for the opponent. Okay, I don't know how many sermons I've given on this very moment. This you have to, you know, and by the way, this is not the first nor the last time that this has happened. And there are, of course, other examples in other sports. You know, I looked up tennis. There are plenty of tennis examples where the opponents kind of look past each other, where they hate each other, and the sport is diminished because of it. And they are saying here that the reason why they are doing it is for the sake of the sport. We need each other as opponents, and therefore we give each other the grace, even in defeat. And it's the victor that goes to the vanquished with the outstretched hand. And that is a remarkable, remarkable scene. In hockey, it's rather equal. I mean, it's already common that both of them do it. So the grace here, back to Pharaoh and Moses, is Pharaoh wants it, okay, and Moses doesn't. And the reason that Moses doesn't is because the rules of equality don't apply here, and the rules of grace don't apply. And I'll show you why, okay? The reason is because the sin of Pharaoh was so tremendous, it's unforgivable. Here is, if you haven't seen this documentary, it's very, very powerful, very powerful. It's called What Our Fathers Did, a Nazi Legacy. It's his name is Sands, Bernard Sands, I think his name is. He's an attorney in England. He's a child of survivors, and he befriends two sons of Nazis who are, you know, terrible. One who's rather famous, his name is Niklaus Frank. He's the son of Hans Frank, who was the governor of the General Gouvernement in Poland, which was the district of the Warsaw Ghetto. And Frank was tried at Nuremberg, and then he was executed. In the moments leading up to the execution, he's visited by a priest. So you have to ask yourself, obviously this is, I don't know if he's Catholic, I don't know. He's visited by a priest, I guess he's Catholic, and the priest performs the rites. Go ahead, here. This is Nicholas Frank, the son of the Nazi visiting the cells at the
It's the only
Nuremberg.
room in the world where I'm a little bit nearer to my father. Sitting here and thinking of being in for about a year, to be in here, coming from a big castle, driving a big Mercedes, having a lot of uniforms, and suddenly he's sitting here with an open toilet, with a small table, with a small bed, nothing else. There is right now in me a little kind of pity. Yes, here he sits. Maybe it's the same place to us.
So it's a momentary feeling of pity. Is it amplified today, the anniversary of his execution?
No, it's not special day of the 16th. Around this time he was already dead.
He's talking about his father.
Shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning, they got him. And the funny thing about when they took my father to the gallows, when they opened the door, my father was kneeling like this. And he said to the priest, "Father, my mother, when I was a boy, my mother used to give me the cross every morning when I was leaving for school. Please do this also now." And I think this Catholic priest was very, very much enjoyed. And he did it. And behind you have all these people, and he was kneeling here. And I used to say, that's a ham actor's exercise.
I'm going to let it go for
Jesus Christ personally has shown himself to my father. And so maybe it wasn't a ham actor's decision to do this. Maybe it's really in those moments, very near to the gallows, very near to the death. I'm now about 30 years older than him. So he was very young, with 46 years. And you know, we will not survive the 16th of October. And maybe it was really an honest, the only and last honest thing he did. He wanted to go back to be an innocent child again. What he was when his mother makes this sign of God on his brain. Maybe the first time I think about it, I think he wanted to be a little boy again and haven't done nothing of all those crimes.
All right, I'm going to stop it here because it's just unbelievably powerful. That whole clip is so powerful in terms of what the themes are. And there's just an echo here. I'm just muting everybody. I'm sorry. So the theme is so powerful. You know, here is an I want to say unrepentant. This man, Hans Frank, was responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of people in his control, and you see the theme is his son, who wrote a very important memoir about living with this tremendous burden. He says I don't know if he's a ham. He's acting to the last moment because he sees all these people and he's presenting himself like a penitent. He wants absolution. He wants the priest to put the sign of the cross on his forehead to give him the pardon, to give him the blessing, to give him a sense of forgiveness, take away the guilt. And the priest obliges. And he, the son, says, this is a farce. He's acting, okay? But then on the other hand, he says, I don't know, maybe he's for the one moment of his life trying to be honest, and it's not, and he I couldn't read, it's hard to understand what he said about the priest. If the word is, and the priest was adroit or enjoyed. I'm not going to make it go over it, but it's the priest. I'm going to say this as a clergy person. We're all a bit of a ham too. We all put on a good show, and the priest, is putting on a show here. He's in his gown and everything, and he's putting on a bit of a show. And you get the sense he's saying, I bet you the priest enjoyed it, or he was adroit, he was smart enough to understand what the meaning of this moment was. The point is, here is an unrepentant Nazi figure who is getting absolution for his crimes when he doesn't deserve absolution at all. He's getting he's being executed, and he of course pays the price, but in nowhere is it near commensurate with the hundreds of thousands of people that he killed or put to death under his watch. Okay, and here just another take on this comes from the series which I just finished watching also, and I'm just going to try and get. Oops, I'm sorry. I don't mean to end the meeting. Share the screen. Share. And this is going to be from this moment. French Village, I'll explain to you in a second. So this is a series that's based in France. It's the resistance. Here you have two prisoners. One is a communist, and one is a French collaborator who is being executed because he wronged the wrong person, and so they're getting rid of him. And they're being visited by a priest. And watch the difference here.
Non, merci. De toute façon.
Okay, I will stop there. A reason why I brought this text, this example, is because they get it. I mean, it's clever. It's a piece of fiction. It's a a very. I think it's I've talked about this series already. It's a very well done depiction. But what the point is that you're asking to we're the innocent people here. We have nothing to regret. We are also, well, one is saying, I have nothing. The other one is a scoundrel, but your presence to give us absolution is ridiculous here. It's stunning in terms of how absurd it is. And that's why they're laughing, in addition to other reasons. Okay. Let me I'll bring up some other things in here. Sorry. So there are instances where divine grace is given by clergy to a monster. That's the Frank incident. And then I will say, in what way so when this, the previous clip was comment on, this is how Nicholas the son refers to his father, Hans Frank, a craven coward, a weakling, but one with not without a kind of animal cunning, an instinct for lying, insinuation, and self-aggrandizement. And that is the presentation of a scoundrel looking for grace. Okay, it's a final act of cunning and delusion and self-aggrandizement. Okay, in what way is grace necessary? In what way is grace a sham? Is Pharaoh's petition for grace a sham? So that's what the reader is left wondering. You and I, as readers of this, I am terribly puzzled by this scene. And what I'm trying to unlock here is that indeed this is the same order, genre of the scoundrel asking for grace. It's a canard, it's a sham, it's a charade. Okay, and Moses is you and me. Moses has no patience for this nonsense. This is absurd to him. Now, in the case of the French village, which I showed you, Marcel the communist and the resistance, who was sentenced to death, along Chassin, the rogue French collaborator, they refused the last rites, precisely as I said, because they see in it, they see the sham on the religion side, not from their side. And that, I think, is the central difference. You ask for, if you have what to ask for, and if there's peace to be established between combatants, if there's peace to be established between rivals, in order to attain that peace, you need the rapprochement. You need the coming together. You need a way to make sure that people can go on, right? The rapprochement, the handshaking, the hugging at the end, the blessing of the angel to Jacob, that enables the story to continue on an even field without conflict. We know something that Pharaoh doesn't know, okay? And this is why the text is so brilliant. We know that this is not the last scene. They have one more scene at the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, okay? And we know that the conflict is going to go on, and that the conflict is going to go on between Israel and Egypt, and the conflict will remain as part of the eternal dynamic of Judaism, that we are not at peace with them. Okay, it's not that we have gotten over the Exodus. We remember it every day. We remember this every day. We remember because we're remembering God's redemption of us. And so what I'm going to say is, it's going to sound harsh, but it may not. It's real, which is there's some crimes for which there is no penance, and some things for which the human being cannot give you pardon. The human being is not an agent. And precisely, and I thought about this, and it's going to sound a little polemical, but Pharaoh is looking to Moses for the blessing because he wants a divine blessing. He sees Moses as the conduit to God.
Right.
And Moses is representing God here as an equal to him. And Moses is saying, go to hell. Moses, I mean, it's worse than that. Okay, I'll spare you other vernacular. But he's basically saying, no way, no way. First of all, you committed so much atrocity. And second of all, you have the nerve. You have your nerve. Okay, and there's no way. And so, it's such a misinterpretation, Pharaoh's misinterpretation of Moses's role as the direct connection to God. Moses is the direct relationship to God for the Jewish people. He's not the relationship for God for Pharaoh. End of story. End of story. And so that is what's embedded in this critical moment. I think that the commentators, they've glossed. It's not that they've glossed over. They comment on it from the tradition, from the within the tradition. This is why I want to say it's important to comment on the Torah from the tradition of hockey. Okay, it's important to comment on the Torah from the tradition of sports and life, okay? Because we know something that is part of the human experience. We know that when you are engaged as a conflict of equals, you need the handshake. You know, lawyers at the end of a case, they take, you know, at least on television, they take each other out, right? And they put it behind them. They you know, who buys who the lunch or who buys who the dinner, right? Somebody buys dinner for someone else. They go and they put it behind because they know that you make me a better lawyer, because they know what their job is, okay? And they know it's not personal. You know, the wrestling opponents, they're great friends with each other, most of them. Hockey players, they're great friends with each other, even if they're on the wrong other teams. You know, athletes are tennis. This is, you know, there are lots and lots of these beautiful scenes of hugging, of shaking, of what in tennis and other sports, and other places where you have competition. And even in conflict, okay? I didn't have this to bring, you know, put up here, but there's a scene in the book, Yudav Ner's book on the prime ministers, where they assemble, I've talked about this before, where, you know, Egyptian veterans and Israeli veterans of the 73 war are in the room together, and there's a moment of tremendous tension. They you know, the diplomats have brought together veterans, people who their lives have been changed and altered. There's PTSD, they're maimed, and, you know, people who are amputees. You know, in Israel now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a series recently called, what is it called? Kippur, Yom Kippur, the atonement. It's about the Yom Kippur War, and there are lots of little documentaries on Israeli television now showing. I mean, the Yom Kippur War is what, 40 years now, more.
They show. I think you're thinking of Valley of Tears.
Yeah, it's that and other things. It's almost 50 years since the Yom Kippur War. Okay, right. And it's so deeply seared into the consciousness. Okay, so here you have a scene where, you know, mortal enemies are in a room together, and they come together after the peace accords, and they have to make peace with each other. Now it's complicated between Egypt and Israel, but they do end up shaking hands and hugging. You know, there's a beautiful scene at the Civil War, you know, the dedication of the monument 50 years, no, 75 years after the Civil War, the last living, you know, veterans of the Civil War, FDR is dedicating the Reconciliation Monument, and they line up the veterans of the South and the North at Pickett's Charge, and they have them walk across the field, and they hug each other. It's just an incredible scene, and of course, you know, the you get the sense that the country can't go on without that reconciliation. And when you don't have that, and here it's why it speaks to us so deeply. We're living in a moment where there's irreconcilable distance between two opposing extremes, where you're never going to get people to be across from each other and to shake hands. You're never going to do that. You know, and you see what kind of turmoil, you know, a country is in when that level of grace doesn't exist. This is why it's so powerful, this moment. I again maintain that there are moments when you can't have grace. Okay, there are moments when it's irreconcilable. Murder, death, irreconcilable, unforgivable, and it's not a human being's place. No human being, no priest, no representative of God is there to give you that blessing. None. That's why Moses sees it absurd. I'll leave you comment. Go ahead, Alana. Alana, then Bob. Go ahead.
It just reminds me of Rabin and Arafat. Rabin did not shake Arafat's hand.
He does shake Arafat's hand in the picture. He doesn't want to shake his hand. He doesn't want to. And there is an interesting insight, you know, because Clinton pushes, you see, and it plays itself out in the visual. You know, Rabin Rabin
He looks away
was
like,
the worst poker player. Rabin, you see it all on his face, and you know inside he loathes Arafat. He hates Arafat, and I think it's Perez that says, "Come on, you have to, come Yitzchak, come, Bobo, you know, that kind of thing." And
Rabbi,
go ahead, Bob.
Don't
Skip. I'm sorry.
Don't you have to? Don't we need to separate this discussion between the politicians who are not in the trenches and the combatants who are?
So look, I do try. I'm sorry.
Combatants respect themselves.
Sorry. I obviously want to keep a little bit of a guardrail here to this, but I can't, there are certain things that are part of our lives now that aren't avoidable. And one of the things that I think is very painful for the public to watch here is the degree to which we have a chasm here. I mean, it's just in front of us. And the Torah here is providing us, I think, a way of looking at this without getting too political, and it's saying, look, in this little moment, I'm talking about 25 words here, okay? Compressed into 25 words here, I've already spoken an hour and 10 minutes about it. Compressed in this scene is a narrative inside a narrative inside a narrative.
But Rabbi, you're talking about feet on the ground. These are the people you're talking about.
So I'm talking about. So it's at that moment that there is no record. That's why it's absurd. Pharaoh is in the middle of combat.
But Pharaoh is a politician. Okay, that's what I'm saying. There's a difference between politicians and boots on the ground.
No, here's one more difference, which is
when you use the the hockey handshake.
Yeah.
Those are combatants. Those are boots on the ground. They are not the coaches. They are not the owners. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I disagree. I think every level on the competition has the requirement to make their grace with the other. When you're in the comic, it's a different story. I think the reason why I'm teasing this out is that Pharaoh never sees himself as an equal combatant to Moses and Aaron. And that's why the moment of asking a petition for a blessing is so absurd. Bob.
Yeah, what I wanted to say, and going back to the text and earlier, is at one point in Exodus, God says that you will be like a god to Pharaoh early on. And so perhaps it's not necessarily a surprise that Pharaoh doesn't really engage in authentic teshuvah. It's incomplete. And it seems to me that he doesn't apologize to Moshe and the Jewish people, and he certainly doesn't apologize to Hashem in all of this, and he's sort of modeling what you don't want to have done. And so for me, as I look at this, it seems like what you don't want to have happen, along with everything that you've said. So it's a failed teshuvah. So
we'd have to take a look at the other text, because there are at least two in my recollection where he says, I've sinned to God, and chatati apam, right?
But Moses is his God because he did these sorts of things. I don't think he really has accepted God in the same way. That's all I'm saying is that.
I agree. Okay, Ellie Ehrlich, you had your hand up and you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm having difficulty with the word grace and the concept of forgiveness. Now, when hockey players on two teams are there, they're going to play with each other next year, or, it's not the same thing. They're in a business, and it's good for their business to shake hands at the end of it. But when we have a personal situation where we cannot give somebody grace, where we cannot forgive somebody, we have things that are happening in our world today that it's going to be very difficult to say, I forgive you, and that you're entitled to grace because of what you have done. I'm having difficulty putting them together.
Well, so that just underscores my point. you need the grace in order to go on. Otherwise, we're going to live in a state of tremulousness, of this kind of, what's going to happen, this anxiety. Look, the Bible speaks to the human truth. The human truth is that there's certain things that human beings need. There's a deep, deep anthropology here. We need to make up at a certain point with people that we're going to be associated with. And that I'm saying all my different examples, North and South, former enemies, Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, even Germany and the rest of Europe, okay? And we could find hits and misses along the way. But part of the story overhanging the modern European and world experience, certainly since World War II, is to what extent do we take responsibility from them, and to what extent we can attain, because we have to live together. Look, this is Israel's issue with Germany and its diplomacy. And look, this is Israel's issue with the Palestinians as well, okay? Because at a certain point, the inevitable, people recognize that the inevitable of history is we live in this land, we share this land. We don't like each other, we don't love each other, we don't want to have anything to do with each other. We want you to leave us alone, okay? But in the end, there are things that you have that we need and things that you have that we need. And we, at the very least, need to show some kind of grace with each other. Otherwise, we're going to live in combat and live in conflict forever. Does anybody want to live in conflict forever? No. Well,
they say a step at the political level is when people attend each other's inaugurations.
Well,
and,
that's
and that
you have the elephant in the room.
This goes back to Bush and Clinton and others all going on missions together with each other. So even though they are opponents,
so look, I'm not going to take the bait here. We are we obviously understand that we have this as a great metaphor for the dilemmas of our time. But lest one think that it's only about principles, that is the main characters. One would be naive. There are large factions of this country that do not have. Look, I mean, I'm aware of people who are looking at Wednesday and saying this is the day of the national boycott of the media. That's what, one side is having the people's inauguration, and one side wants to say it's the national boycott the media day. So in that sense, what we have is no ability to find any kind of grace. And I think it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. It's just a fact. Ilana, and then we'll end.
What about where it says, זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק, לא תשכח.
So again, there's no grace for Amalek. And this is, I think, the Bible's theology, which is there are certain things that a human being can't forgive. And this obviously is a debate. It's a debate among certain people, certain elements in terms of how we move on. Do survivors forgive? They're not. Elie Wiesel used to say this also. He says it's not for me to forgive. It's for the victims to forgive, and the victims are not here, so therefore I can't speak for them. And I don't want to say that that's a clever way. It's not clever. It's just the truth. The victim is the one that has to forgive, and the victims are dead. So what do? That's it.
But King Shaul HaMelech, he was punished for being for forgiving. The kingdom was taken away from him because he forgave Amalek. So the Bible opinion is actually, in many cases, in certain cases, not to forgive.
I agree. We're tough. We're Jews. We're tough. Okay. What I want to say is, you don't get off so easy. You don't get off by getting absolution. You don't get off by getting your last rites. You don't get off, easy by just checking a box on a form. It's much more complicated than that, and that's the message to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, you think you're worthy. I don't even have a word for you, and he leaves. All right.
One more thing. Hashem melech chanun verachum, melech chanun verachum. So Hashem is an example to forgive. Forgive. Hashem is
Indeed.
forgiving. So
very good, but forgiving,
God
with what you can be forgiven. Okay, exactly. Hashem is the ultimate in compassion, but there are certain things that God won't forgive, namely misusing God's name for evil and murder. Okay. On that note,
let's not murder.
Let's not murder. I really enjoyed being with you today.